We're going to go ahead and get started with our panelists today. Very excited for everybody to be joining us for today's expert panel discussion on Microsoft Teams. So I am your host, Scott Black. I will be the moderator of today's session. A little bit about me is that I've been with Burwood now for 2 years. I am coming to you live from beautiful, balmy Bloomington, Illinois. I think we just got above zero yesterday, so very excited about that. I work with customers across the U.S. as an account manager, and a lot of those conversations are focusing about Microsoft Teams, so that's why we're having our conversation today. A little bit about Burwood Group, for those of you who aren't familiar. We're an IT consulting and integration firm headquartered in Chicago with employees and offices across the U.S. We help our clients leverage the cloud to transform their IT infrastructure, including collaboration and end-user computing environments. We're also a Microsoft Gold partner. We'll go through a couple of housekeeping items today. We are in fact recording, and a recorded version of this webinar will be available and sent to all registrants. If you have questions throughout, please use the chat window on the right-hand side of your Teams browser, and we'll get to as many as we can. And to encourage folks to ask questions today, we are doing a giveaway. We're excited to be giving away a STK Steakhouse and Traveling Vineyards dine-at-home kits to 4 attendees today. To be entered to win, all you have to do is submit a question to our panelists at any time during this event, using the chat function on the right-hand side of your screen. All attendees are muted, so the chat function is the only way to ask questions. Be sure that when you do ask that you include your first and last name so we know who asked the question. At the end of the hour, we will be selecting 4 random winners of questions asked throughout the presentation. Good luck. And I want to take a moment to thank our partners for today's event. We have DaleCheck and Citrix. DaleCheck is a Microsoft Gold partner and IT services firm out of St. Louis. And Citrix is a worldwide leader in modern workspace technology. Thank you both for making today's event possible. And without any further ado, I will introduce our panelists to get started with this presentation. So we'll start with Josh Allen.
Thanks, Scott. I'm Josh Allen. I'm the Chief Technology Officer at DaleCheck Technology Group. I've been in the managed services industry for a little over 10 years, and we specialized in Microsoft-based managed services and help desk services.
Awesome. Brian.
Hello, I'm Brian Buck, and I am Practice Director for the Collaboration Practice at Burwood. My group has 4 areas of focus: collaboration platforms, which includes UC as a service offerings and Microsoft Teams; collaboration spaces, which provides meeting room design and build services, including Teams rooms; platform applications, where we focus on extending applications through integrations and customization; and customer engagement, where we focus on contact center solutions and customer self-service use cases. I have 18 years of experience working in communications and collaboration systems, and over 11 of those have been with Burwood Group.
Thank you, Brian. Andrew.
Good afternoon, Andrew Epstein here, consultant with the End User Training and Adoption Group. I've been in IT for over 10 years now, working within the adoption practice realm, and we help with firms getting up to speed on whether it be Teams or other collaboration or workplace technologies. And we've helped as small of organizations as about 5 or 6 people move over to Teams, as large as a 50,000 person global organization roll out as well. So keeping adoption there at the forefront.
Thank you. And last but not least, Ed.
Thanks, Scott. Yeah, my name's Ed Kerstetter. I've been with Burwood for almost 13 years now, and I'm the practice manager for our collaboration spaces team.
Thank you. And so, since the coronavirus happened, we've seen a lot of webinars, and we've really structured this around a panelist discussion. And what's driving this is a lot of our customer conversations out in the field. So we work with businesses across manufacturing, financial services, and healthcare, and we get a lot of questions about Teams. Things like, I have a big investment in Microsoft licensing already. Should I be rolling out Teams since I'm already paying for it? We also get questions like, if I roll it out, what does it replace, or what can it replace in my existing communication infrastructure? So that's how we kind of came to have this discussion today and why we're focusing on this topic. There's a lot of questions about how Teams fits into the enterprise collaboration suite. So to structure today's conversation, we're going to be focusing on really three components. And the first of that is, what is UCaaS? Second of which is going to be plan and deploy Microsoft Teams. And finally, ensuring successful rollout. So to start, we're going to go with what is UCaaS to level set everybody on UCaaS. Brian, how would you define UCaaS?
Yeah, thanks, Scott. UC as a service, or UCaaS, is the evolution of voice and collaboration technology into the cloud. UCaaS provides faster access to new features, borderless interactions between employees as well as business partners or customers, and simplified IT operations. Essentially, we're talking about easier access to collaboration tools. But what is collaboration? I think is another good question to ask here. Well, the definition of collaboration is the action of working with someone or a group of people to produce or create something. Collaboration technology solutions include instant and persistent messaging, real-time interactions via voice and video, document sharing, online meetings, which of course includes all of the above, and content development capabilities. And with the need to enable remote workers, that's really been a catalyst for change in the industry. We have seen a significant increase in adoption of collaboration solutions as working from home has become pervasive and people need a way to communicate and work together effectively when they can't be in the same room. Many organizations I've talked to have identified that they plan to continue offering remote work to employees and even after the pandemic has ended. Having a solution or solutions in place to enable this is essential. And even as a remote worker myself, even before the pandemic, we've relied on these types of has really further enhanced our ability to collaborate, I believe.
Brian, who are some of the players involved in collaboration?
Yeah, to take an industry analyst point of view, as you see here, we have the Gartner Magic Quadrant for UCaaS shared on the screen. Microsoft and RingCentral are clear leaders in the market, being upward top right here. Followed by, we have Cisco, Zoom, and 8x8. So those are obviously five key vendors to look at. But selecting the best UCaaS solution for your organization largely depends on your specific business needs. Capabilities largely vary across players in the market, so making sure that your use cases can be satisfied with the solution is important. So to get started in selecting, you'll want to dig into specifics with the business users. What existing tools or workflows do you have in place today? We don't want to hinder progress of what is working today, but we could potentially automate workflows or enhance capabilities. Next, what applications do employees use regularly and rely on? And can they be integrated into the collaboration solution easily and reliably? Lastly, how are your users communicating today? Are they using chat, or do they prefer voice or video interactions? So to sum it up, answer for your organization, what are the capabilities you actually need? And start with that before evaluating the vendors that are out there. Costs are obviously part of the equation. If you already have Microsoft licensing in place, for instance, then it's an even easier decision to consider Microsoft Teams for your needs.
Fit into the collaboration environment.
Well, Teams is both a UCaaS solution and also more than a UCaaS solution. Most people know Teams as the replacement for Skype for Business, and many are using it primarily as a corporate chat or IM client. But that's just one of the many capabilities the platform offers. Hopefully, you've already realized the power of leveraging Teams and channels to share files with specific groups of people. From a voice and calling perspective, Teams can be deployed to replace legacy voice, on-premises voice over IP, Skype for Business, or even older PBX solutions that you might have in place. From a PSTN calling perspective, Teams can be turned up with direct routing directly with Microsoft's calling plans or via third-party SIP services, or it can also be deployed with on-premises voice services via direct routing that is connected either to an existing voice system or the PSTN directly. So you have a lot of capabilities when it comes to enabling voice within Teams, or a lot of options rather. Teams can also be integrated with existing voice and video solutions, and this is where we're seeing a lot of value. From our perspective, is identifying how can we either temporarily so that we can gracefully transition from an old platform to Teams, or even permanently deploy Teams to fit into a broader multi-vendor strategy within your environment.
So it's sounding like Teams is more than just an application. It's more than that, like a hub almost.
Yes, Teams is designed to bring all aspects of collaboration into one place. A single platform where the built-in real-time and persistent communications capabilities can coexist along a myriad of third-party or custom applications. It can be deployed to be the online meetings platform for your organization, or it can be used alongside, providing easy access to another meeting platform such as Zoom or Webex, allowing you to schedule meetings and attend meetings from within the Teams interface. This is also true from a UCaaS perspective. Teams can obviously be used to provide the full suite of UCaaS capabilities, but it can also be used alongside an existing UCaaS solution or a UCaaS solution you're investigating outside of Teams through the use of the APIs provided through Microsoft. Cisco Webex calling is a good example of where we've embedded calling capabilities within Teams so that you are still living within Microsoft Teams, but you're using a third party for that calling capability and access to features. Working on documents together, keeping track of tasks in a planner board. There's a lot of things that you can do all within Teams. So it's designed to be a one-stop shop for all of your collaboration needs within your organization.
Awesome. So we've already had a question come in, which fits nicely into this topic. Josh, can you walk us through some of the platform strengths and weaknesses?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I think we'll kind of start with the weaknesses part of this first, right? So everybody kind of knows what they're getting into. And I would say overall, I've been mostly surprised around how small a lot of the weaknesses of the platform is. Brian was mentioning how powerful it can be, and I'll get into that as we get into the strengths. But along with that comes some small weaknesses. So the first thing is really that Teams has been more designed for what I would consider probably mostly a younger audience, right? So we're all probably used to going into work. We've got a file share, something like that. We know exactly what the file structure looks like, where things are located. And Teams tries to simplify this in a slightly different way, in that the search bar has become more of a universal search, right? So everything lives there. You can get around through Teams through there. You don't have to click through a bunch of different teams or channels. You can get everywhere you need to go from there. You can search conversations. You can search all of your documents that have been shared. And this is more of, made for everybody having like cell phones today, where everything is just a quick search away. Even you see it with Windows 10, right? The whole old style start menu is gone, and now you really just hit start, you type in what you're looking for, whatever that is, whether it's settings or whatever else comes up. And this is exactly what we're seeing with the Teams platform. So that shift into that mindset tends to make adoption slightly slower for your staff members, but once they get there, you start to realize how powerful that can be and how easy it is to just go into your search bar and get whatever piece of information you need. The second kind of thing around that is really just the amount of upfront work you need to be conscious of as you're starting a Teams deployment. If you don't really put in some time up front, you end up experiencing things like team sprawl, and that gets hard to kind of come back from if you're not thinking about it up front. Outside of that, it's really just the pace at which Microsoft is moving, which is kind of a good and a bad at the same time. New feature rollouts are coming every month. It almost feels like a weekly basis that we're seeing big new features. And because of that pace, sometimes smaller things don't necessarily see the light of day as quickly as they should. They just did a pretty big overhaul of the calendar functionality, but there's still some really small things that are missing from that. Example, most of us are probably used to working with like Microsoft Outlook. You're able to go in there, do side-by-side comparisons of calendars, right? That's not a feature that's really in Teams yet, along with like some of the color categories of your different events. So just small things like that, end up not being there because Microsoft is trying to roll out a lot of the bigger stuff, especially with everybody moving into remote work. So I think there's a couple people who get frustrated at the lack of some smaller features, but if you really look at it, we're getting just huge strides pretty constantly and consistently, adding some of the bigger things that we're all looking for. From more of the positive side of where Microsoft Teams strengths are, I mean, I mentioned earlier, right, that a lot of people start using Teams as just a replacement for Skype, but it is so much more. You can definitely tell that when Microsoft started designing Teams, collaboration was in the forefront of their mind. The collaboration and document sharing that Teams has is absolutely best in class. It makes it so easy. It eliminates things like back and forth emails. You know, you have a Word doc, everybody wants to work on it. You're emailing it back and forth. Who's made what changes? Is this the latest version? All of that is gone. You can put it in a centralized place with a focus group of conversation around it, and everybody can work on it and update it at the same time. This is also something that we at DaleCheck are using externally with clients as well. You know, if we put together like technology action plans or things, we can share that out and we can have a really collaborative experience with our clients. Outside of that, you know, I would say that, you know, Brian and Scott, you both mentioned how Teams can be more of a hub. And that is 100% true. You know, I think we have a nice graphic up there of a bunch of remotes. And right now, your day is consistent of going through Outlook, going through, you know, Salesforce, a whole bunch of different apps. And really, Teams has become more of this universal remote control where everything can be inside of there. You know, Brian was mentioning how you guys have integrated Cisco Webex into Teams so that even though you're using this other app, it doesn't seem that way to you. You're living your day-to-day inside of Teams. And that's exactly what Microsoft is going for. They want your entire job to end up being inside of Teams, where this is your go-to place to do anything. You see that through all of the integrations that they have out there and all the applications. I mean, even today, you can go in there and in 5 minutes have Salesforce set up inside of Teams. I mean, that's huge and absolutely shows what they're looking to do and where they're looking to take Microsoft Teams. The other part of that is just how powerful it really can be. You know, we at DaleCheck actually use it to automate a ton of our processes. Through the integration of Power Automate and the new approvals app that just came out, you know, we've been able to automate really simple things like submitting hardware purchase requests, but even really complex things like onboarding all of our new employees and going through all of their training and their first essentially week on the job. All of that has been automated inside of Teams to make that experience consistent and easy for, you know, our onboarding employees. So, you know, when you look at kind of those things together, it really is back to the point of Microsoft trying to put everybody into Teams and giving you this tool where it doesn't matter if where you're at, what device you're on, you can pull all these things up just from your cell phone. It's really making it sticky for you to be able to do your job from this single pane of glass.
We've had a number of questions come in as Josh was going through the strengths and weaknesses. One that I want to circle back to is, can you link Zoom meetings as well? And Brian, what are your thoughts on linking to Zoom meetings?
Yeah, Zoom does have a few options for integrating with Teams. One is from a starting meetings perspective. You can start Zoom meetings from Microsoft Teams through a bot that Zoom has available. Also, you can join Microsoft Teams meetings from Zoom Rooms if you happen to adopt Zoom Rooms. Although that doesn't quite work in the other direction just yet. That's something that is on the roadmap. But yes, the answer to that question is Zoom does have the ability to kick off meetings, or you can start ad hoc meetings from within a Microsoft Teams channel.
Excellent. Another question that we got is, can you explain how Teams and SharePoint work together? Josh?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's kind of funny because a lot of the back end of Teams is existing Microsoft products. As an example, the chat functionality actually works through Exchange messaging, and a majority of the actual collaboration space is SharePoint on the back end. So when you're working in Teams, right, everybody sees this nice, you know, single pane of glass, and that's where you're working. But if you're, you know, one of the IT admins, you can actually interact with all of this on the back end through SharePoint, right? Every team that you create and channel is just creating site collections out in SharePoint. You can also mount things directly inside of Teams that are existing SharePoint collections as well. So you really do kind of get a best of both worlds, where your users are seeing single pane, but you still have all the power of the SharePoint platform on the back end.
Cool. So to some of the other questions that we've got, we're going to be diving into as we move on. And so we're going to move on to part 2 here, which is planning and deploying Microsoft Teams. And so these are some best practices, common mistakes, and ways to avoid those mistakes. So to start with, obviously, security is top of mind for everybody. Governance also very key. Josh, what are some of the things that you're seeing in the field when it comes to security and governance with Teams?
Yeah, I'm actually glad that you gave me this question, because it was something I kind of touched on in the last section, where, one of the weaknesses is a lot of upfront work in terms of how you're planning. And this is a big place where we see that. A lot of the common mistakes that we end up seeing are around kind of the majority of people who are standing up teams. You're usually doing it to kind of test it out, or somebody happens to find it and they throw it on there. And Microsoft's done a good job of making Teams really sticky. It catches amongst the staff very quickly. And so you see this influx of everybody kind of using it, but not necessarily using it the right way, because, there hasn't been any training or anything like that. And so you end up, when your organization sees the benefit and you've decided you want to roll it out, one of the first things we see is just a real lack of auditing, right? Because now all of a sudden you have all these teams that have been created. We tend to see a lot of teams that are unused, right? Because they're spun up and then abandoned. We also see a lot of identical teams. Great examples of that are things like, you might have an HR team, you might have a team called Human Resources, and you might have a third one called Human Resources HR. We see that a lot. So one of the first things that, we always try and make sure that people are putting in place is just some type of auditing that can look at, usage for any of the teams, pull up all the team names. If you see anything that looks similar, it can email out to the owners of those teams to make sure these are things that are still in use, and can start consolidating those. You don't want to get into a place where, nobody knows where to go, because there's a lot of the same thing now. The second place that, I tend to see a lot of security and governance pieces that aren't taken advantage of is a lot of internal security pieces that Microsoft actually has that people, I don't think, really know is out there. A great example of this is something like their data loss prevention governance policies. So this is something that is very easy to turn on. There's a little bit of upfront work in terms of kind of categorizing your data. This is especially important if you have to meet some form of compliance, whether that's, PCI, HIPAA, NIST, FedRAMP. But this ensures that you're not leaking credit card information, social security information. It looks for these patterns and blocks those out from being able to be available inside of Teams. The other thing that I really see there too is just the way that Teams get built out, right? So I typically see either one of two ways. You're either using this because you're a services company, and so a lot of your teams are going to be things, projects that everybody's collaborating on. Or if you're using this in a different type of organization, usually you want to set that up to be something more around how your organization is actually set up. So I alluded to the HR department. You would usually have a sales team, things like that. But usually it ends up being this big mix, because people aren't really thinking about how they want this to work and how they want this set up from the get-go. And it ends up just kind of becoming this mess where people don't know where to go and how to access the information they need. So a little bit of upfront work, just kind of thinking through some of these things and how you want to organize your data, especially from a governance perspective, will go a long way in helping to get you started and making sure that you have a successful deployment.
Thank you. And so it sounds like a lot of folks that start with Teams usually use it for IMing and document sharing, but meetings is also possible. So the next logical step is adding enterprise voice. Ed, talk us through enterprise voice with Teams.
Sure. Yeah, as you alluded to, most organizations sort of have a linear path when they're adopting Teams. So they'll initially use it for chat and IM and the Teams functionality and document sharing. And then usually they'll start using it for meetings, but mainly for internal use. And so the next logical step here is adding voice. And there's really two kind of pieces to this. There's the enterprise voice piece, which I'll cover in a second. But the first piece I want to cover is sort of audio conferencing capability. So there's a difference between enterprise voice and adding audio conferencing capabilities into your Teams meetings. And so the audio conferencing basically is, actually, let me take a step back. When you're doing Teams without audio conferencing, you can host a Teams meeting, but there is only a click here to join link. There's no dial-in. So the audio conferencing capabilities adds that dial-in functionality, and it allows for people external to the organization that may not be using Teams, or maybe they're just not available to join via the Teams client. Maybe they're on the road on their phone and it doesn't have a Teams client, and it allows for a conference bridge number to be present and for users to dial into that Teams meeting via that conference bridge number. So that's the sort of the audio conferencing side of the voice. The big component though is enterprise voice. So this is adding PSTN functionality into Teams with the goal of replacing your existing voice solution. So there's a few things really to consider if you're looking to go down this path. The first is licensing. There are a few ways to get the required licenses. If you have E5, basically you're looking at what's called Microsoft calls a phone license. So you can, if you have E3, you can look to add a phone license, or if you have E5, that phone license would be typically included in most of the E5 plans. So once you have the licensing, the next step is, okay, how do I give people numbers, right? And there's really two options here. There's what's called Microsoft calling plans, where you basically pay Microsoft for numbers, or you port numbers into Microsoft, and then you assign those numbers to the users. But in the end, Microsoft ends up, being the sole source for those numbers. The second way is what's called direct routing, and there's a few different flavors of direct routing. If you have an existing footprint on-premise, so you're coming from an on-premise solution, but you really like your carrier and you like the rates you're getting, you can do sort of what's called on-premise direct routing, where you can leverage your existing PSTN circuits. You would bring in a Microsoft certified SBC, session border controller, something like an AudioCodes SBC, a Cube, a Ribbon. There's a few other certified manufacturers in that space, where you own the numbers, but you configure the users in Teams with those numbers, and then that SBC basically links the Microsoft cloud to your footprint on premise where those PSTN circuits are coming into place. There's another flavor of direct routing, which is sort of like cloud direct routing, where you can pay a carrier, a separate carrier like an Intrado or bandwidth.com to host that SBC for you. And then you don't have to have those circuits come on premise. Let's say they would own those circuits and they would own the SBC, and it basically integrates into the Microsoft cloud that way. The last consideration, this kind of ties into voice a little bit, would be from a redundancy perspective. Just recently, Microsoft announced the ability for SBA, survivable branch appliances, where you can have an appliance on premise where you terminate a few circuits that are used in case of an emergency, if the internet goes out, or if there's an outage in the Microsoft cloud. That if you're familiar on the Cisco side with say SRST, it's pretty similar to that, where you have some backup links on premise in case your connection to the cloud goes down. So that's at a very high level, sort of the difference between whether you're going calling plans or direct routing. The next decision usually that's made is, do I go completely soft phone, or do I still need hard phones? And in a lot of organizations, it's typically both. There are some users that really want a hard phone, really don't like the soft phones, or maybe you have like lobby phones and things like that you still need a hard phone for. If you do go the soft phone direction, just please keep in mind that please don't try to leverage like the built-in microphones in a lot of the laptops, they don't really sound very good. So you're still looking at usually purchasing some hardware related to that, like a decent USB camera possibly, or a USB speakerphone or headset, something like that to really help from an audio quality perspective. And then lastly here on the voice side, just some things to take note of from a functionality perspective. It's if you're coming from more of a traditional VoIP on-premise phone system, there's not like a one-to-one mapping of features. So let's say you're coming from Call Manager on-premise, not every single feature from Call Manager is available in the cloud. Some features aren't, and this is the case really with any cloud UCaaS phone system, to be honest. But some features maybe are done a little bit differently. Maybe they're called something different, and then some features are just not supported. So, like from a fax perspective, the Microsoft Teams doesn't, from an enterprise voice perspective, doesn't support fax. So you'd be looking to move to like an eFax solution. Attendant console is another one that comes up where currently Microsoft doesn't have support for attendant consoles, but in the near future, I think there's an API that's going to release to do that. Analog lines, if you have analog lines, you need some way to get those into the Microsoft phone system, usually via the use of an SBC, and things like paging, shared lines or lines with auto answer, just some things you need to take note of if you're doing that today, because you're going to have to account for that when you're moving to enterprise voice.
Excellent. So we've gotten a lot of questions about contact center, and we knew that we would get that because these come up with our customers. Brian, what are your thoughts around contact center and Teams?
Yep, thanks, Scott. So first off, Teams is not a contact center solution. It does have some contact center-like functionality, such as call queuing and auto attendance. So call queuing can provide a greeting message. You can play music for people while they're waiting in a queue. You can provide some basic call routing in a first in, first out manner to identified agents. And you can set some specific handling options for queue workflow, queue overflow, and timeouts. Although that's the extent of it, and I wouldn't consider that to be contact center. That's just some basic call queuing functionality. And like I said, you can also set up some auto attendance, which would allow you to provide menus to callers where they can pick from a list of options, which would then take them to various destinations. But those are going to be predefined options, and it does lack in a self-service capabilities perspective. So if you're looking for a solution that can provide a level of self-service and integrate with backend data of some sort, you're going to want to look at a contact solution or something similar to that. Consider contact center as another application, which can be integrated into Teams. I've seen solutions that leverage Teams as the soft phone, and there's also the opportunity to even embed the agent state and call control functions of a contact center application, a third-party contact center application, into Teams, which will allow agents to continue to live in Teams as their collaboration hub, like we mentioned earlier, but still relying on that third-party contact center solution to perform the contact center functions. So a true contact center solution is going to provide a supervisor or a manager view, allowing the supervisor to perform monitoring functions and potentially managing calls for agents, detailed reporting capabilities, which would include call and agent statistics. You're going to want to look at quality management to make sure we're evaluating calls and that our agents are conforming to the level of quality that we expect. As well as workforce management solutions for larger contact centers. Most likely, these advanced functions would still be managed through external applications, at least today. And if you have any of these needs, we can certainly help. As I mentioned in the beginning, we do have a contact center, our customer engagement group that focuses on contact center. So we did get a couple of questions, as Scott mentioned. One of those is how is Teams going to address the need for phone work groups and environments such as contact centers? So I think we've answered that one. Like I said, there is the basic call queuing capability. So if you have some general needs that maybe you don't need those advanced functions I mentioned, then that could suffice. But typically we recommend that you evaluate a true contact center solution. The second question we saw was Teams becoming a contact center solution in the long run? Is there a roadmap for Microsoft getting into the contact center space? And today I would say no. I haven't seen anything from a roadmap perspective. Although Microsoft has mentioned that they may get into that space at some point, today no. If you have that need, we recommend that you look at contact center solutions, and then of course evaluate how that might integrate into Teams, so that you can continue to allow your agents to consider Teams their collaboration hub.
Excellent, thank you. And obviously the coronavirus has impacted this, but whenever we get back to whatever normal looks like, Ed, what are some ways to bring Microsoft Teams into collaboration spaces?
Sure, yeah, not a lot of people have been thinking about conference rooms over the last year or so. But with sort of a return to work push and with vaccines coming, definitely something to consider, moving forward again. So yeah, there's really two ways to outfit collaboration spaces with Microsoft Teams. The first way is sort of what I would consider more of the legacy way to do it, which is Windows PC based, where you basically put a PC in the room, connect a wireless mouse and keyboard to it, and users can sign in to that PC, launch the Teams application, and there's usually a USB speakerphone in the middle of the room, USB camera, and then you're using like the TV speakers mainly in order to connect to the meeting. And again, I kind of term that as more of a legacy way of doing things, and the reason is that typically there's two major reasons. The user experience is usually pretty poor in that scenario because users are going to have to sign in. You're worried about batteries on the Bluetooth devices. What if a Windows updates hits and when you're and it's rebooting for a meeting, right? There's a lot of considerations you need to users need to keep in mind there. And also from a security perspective, it's not necessarily great because then you're looking at, does a user sign in with their account? Do they sign in with a general service account? So there's shared passwords. What if somebody forgets to sign out and maybe they're mapping file shares, right? It opens up a whole can of worms from the security side. So sort of the newer or preferred way to do it in a lot of cases would be leveraging what's called Microsoft Teams rooms, or MTRs, MTR for short. And these are certified Teams devices that most of the time still use a PC on the back end, but that PC is locked down, right? It's running a special Teams software that basically takes over the PC. Users don't have access to the operating system. They can't load programs, and they really don't sign. They don't sign into it. Once the computer boots up, it logs into the account automatically that you assigned for it, and it basically locks everything down. And there are a few manufacturers in this space, Yale, Crestron, Poly, Logitech, that make certified Teams rooms. And there are several benefits to it. Ease of use. Most of these rooms use an external touchpad where it's a very sleek, easy to use user interface where you can integrate with Outlook on the back end, so that if you schedule a Teams meeting, or as Brian alluded to earlier, a Webex or a Zoom, now that functionality exists. You can walk into the room and hit the green join button in order to join the meeting. And it shows a list of your meetings, and you're not having to worry about launching different applications in that in-room PC. It can also integrate with other approved peripherals, like certain DSPs, like BiAmp, I believe QSC, are all certified, where you can do premium audio, say, your boardroom Shure MXA 910 microphones, right? And into the speaker system, so that's supported as well. The downside to this is, though, while it can integrate with Webex and Zoom now, integration with other platforms such as, say, GoToMeeting isn't really possible because there's just no support for it. So that's where that legacy PC base is a little bit more flexible, because any application you can load on your laptop, you can load on that in-room PC. However, typically the user experience ends up trumping that in most cases.
Excellent. Talk through some network considerations that we should think about as well.
Yeah, sure. So obviously, if we're talking about doing meetings over Teams and doing enterprise voice and doing video, it would be amiss not to cover network, right? By default, the settings that Teams is configured with in the admin portal isn't great. There's only a range of 20 ports for meetings. Traffic is all marked when the Teams traffic can mark traffic is all marked the same at DSP 34. So you can't split out audio and video and content share and signaling like you would normally do with, probably what you're using with your on-premise solution. So there's certainly some optimizations out of the box that can be done from an admin portal perspective. The main thing though is if you're coming from an on-premise platform for voice and meetings, it changes the traffic flow, right? We're used to having high bandwidth internally and routing all that traffic from, let's say, branch offices through a central core, and then going out maybe a central internet pipe with some redundancy built, maybe at remote sites. But that's so we can filter all the traffic, see into it, and then provide high throughput. Teams sort of changed that a little bit when you're talking about a cloud system, because the goal now from traffic flows is to get into Microsoft's cloud as quickly as possible. So if you're used to doing split tunnel VP, or if you're used to doing like full tunnel VPNs for remote workers, typically the recommendation would be to break out that traffic for Teams for the Microsoft Cloud IPs and not send that through the VPN, send that direct out, right? So instead of trunking all the traffic through to a central spot, we're looking at getting into the Microsoft Cloud as quickly as possible. VDI also comes into play as well. Typically, while the traffic flows also change, that is not something you usually do with routing. It's usually done now with special team software that a client that will actually egress that audio traffic or that the AV traffic locally and not have to trunk that through to the back to the data center. And usually that's a different Teams client, and usually a newer version of the VDI client is required as well. And then the last thing would be around QoS. We made all those other changes. It's similar to what you're used to with on-premise around, okay, we need to mark traffic and then prioritize that traffic. But that's something that's often overlooked. And while you can get everything configured great from a meetings and policies perspective, if you don't have the network configured correctly, it's not going to end up being a very good user experience in meetings and with video and audio.
Awesome. Thank you, Ed, and appreciate everybody's questions. Please keep them coming. And we're getting to our final component here around ensuring success for the rollout. And Andrew has seen a lot of these deployments, and the technology is cool, but we got to make sure that the people adopt it as well. So what does the best practice adoption strategy look like, Andrew?
Yeah, thanks, Scott. So I think one thing we have to keep in mind here is that as we start to talk about the technology and all the different functions that we have access to, we have to remember that at the heart of this project and the heart of all these implementations is our end users. And that's really the voice we need to concentrate on as we look at the beginning of the project and translating that all the way throughout. People don't want to change on their own, and just because they know how to do something, it doesn't mean that they're actually going to do it. And that's one of the things that we need to work on and help to drive adoption, is to consider what those specific end user needs are and how the training team or some of the adoption folks can help translate those into what the needs are for project teams and some of the technology teams, that we can start to drive that adoption all the way throughout the project. And we'll talk about some of the other aspects here on the next slide. So the one thing we want to start off with here is planning for the change. And oftentimes this is the part that gets missed. So we tend to think of training coming at the very end of a project, throwing it in, and we're going to go ahead and give them some quick reference cards, maybe some videos, and if we're really lucky, maybe even offering them a training class. And oftentimes we need to sort of go back to the very beginning of a project and align what we're going to be doing for that training or that actual, interchange as to what we're going to be looking at for requirements. So what do we need to talk about as far as what users need access to? What jobs are they trying to accomplish with this new technology? And then also starting to develop some of those metrics for success and for adoption. We're also going to want to look at some readiness assessments to determine how ready we are for this change and where we are as an organization in terms of planning for this change. As far as communication goes, this is oftentimes left out. We need to make sure that folks are aware of what changes are coming. They understand how this is going to be a benefit for them, not necessarily a drawback, and also give them any sort of testimonials or perhaps words of wisdom from some of our champions or some folks we've identified as being sort of leaders in the organization. Kind of walking through that will then start to deploy teams, actually giving some knowledge to those desktop or some of those people who are going to be at the forefront of answering some of those questions, making sure they are experts in their field, and I'll be able to answer some of those questions coming from those end users. And now really the sort of where we come in as adoption experts and training experts is towards that end of the process where we had the end user preparation. So in this phase, we want to talk about the delta between what our current and future state are and exactly how we're going to use the training arm here to really leverage those results. So talking about all the different workflows that are going to be affected by this change, everyone from accounting all the way up to HR to CXO level, how is teams going to impact their day to day? And we need to understand how that workflow is going to be embedded into the technology. We also need to look at, for that end user preparation, different modalities of training. So not just webinars, not just in-person training, but looking at things like micro learnings and handouts and lunch and learn sessions, and how we're going to be able to blend all these sort of technology offerings and training offerings to cater to each one of the users that are out there. And then kind of ramping up towards the end here, we do have the support process. We do recommend having at the elbow support for at least day 1, 2, 3, and the full week really of that go live. We want to make sure that folks have an on-site resource that they are familiar with, that they understand, they see as a knowledge expert, and typically that's going to be someone who is associated with the training or some of the introduction into the actual programs. So we do want to make sure they have that reference. And then also, we typically recommend building out an entire team site just for training resources. So once you have turned that site live, we actually use a team within Microsoft Teams to serve as sort of that question and answer and response forum, as well as all the document repository and all the help documents that are within there. And then again, kind of going back to the very top, looking to just sort of reincorporate all these feedbacks into some of the next options that come across or next functions that are out there.
So what are some features that are commonly overlooked in training?
Sure. One of the biggest ones we always see overlooked is communication. Letting folks know what's coming down the pipeline, what it's going to involve as far as what they need to change and how we're trying to help them, and things that may be of great benefit to folks that they're not really aware of. Things like mobile access. So not talking about mobile throughout the training, giving them the ability to access from wherever they might be, whether it be through Teams online or their actual mobile device, and how that's going to help them with their day-to-day. So it's enabling these workers to really use the technology, whether they be in a home environment or in a work environment or on the road, letting them know about all these different features, as well as communicating out the why and how what's changing.
And why is Teams more challenging for some users versus others?
Scott, that's a $1 million question in the training world, right? So why are some people more apt to make the change, and why are some more resistant? And I think a lot of this again comes back to sort of getting those clear expectations about what the technology is, how we're going to be using it, and as well as where we're going to be using certain aspects of this. So if we have folks that are used to using Skype for Business for communication, we need to make sure they can correlate that, yes, now Teams is your new leverage arm for that. Or if we're looking to bring in Teams meetings, how are we going to let them know that, yeah, instead of using Zoom from now on, we're now going to be using Teams meetings. So it's really addressing some of those concerns and helping folks understand not just what the technology is, but what you're going to be using it for is really that dividing gap. We see this all the time with things like OneDrive. A lot of organizations are like cloud, cloud, cloud. We want to get on the cloud. And that's a great thing to do. But if your folks don't know how to do it, we really do need to get folks to understand what cloud is, and then also how teams can leverage the cloud and how easy it is to use those different things. So I think that's kind of where we need to go to.
Cool. So folks that have already deployed Teams, are there things they can do now which improves the user experience?
Yep. So if you already have deployed Teams, there's certainly some things we can kind of go back to the beginning and talk about what other offerings there are, and also what some of the features and functions that folks are trying to use that maybe are available and they just don't know about. I think that sometimes that's what we need to do is kind of take a step back and say, all right, did we really offer this person or this group enough, hearsay when we're trying to look at developing a project?
How should we continue training as new features come live? And of course, the other question that goes along with that is, how do we measure success over time?
Right. So, I mean, Microsoft's great about releasing new features. They're coming up all the time, and we see them out on a monthly basis or even sometimes multiple times a month. And while that's great, it is hard to keep up with from an IT or training standpoint. Oftentimes, what we like to see and have done is, again, using that teams-wide or enterprise-wide team. Usually communicate out a lot of those changes through there and use some of our other arms like micro learnings to address some of those topics, as well as having that frequent communication. It's also a great idea to get some of your power users or some of your champions on a beta mode so they can sort of test some of those capabilities, see what's out there and how it's going to help their organization. So we do see that quite a bit. And again, communication is key here. So letting folks know what's coming out, giving them enough time to get familiar with it, and also offering some sort of training intervention, whether it be an in-person class or just a micro learning. And then as far as looking at, how do we really measure success over time? Microsoft does have some great tools available for using, sort of measuring success. We can look at things like, how many new teams we have, or how many, communications are being sent out via chat. That's all perfect. But we also want to look a little deeper here as to the full adoption of the actual product. So are folks using links in their email as opposed to using attachments anymore, or how are we really getting the folks to adopt towards more of a cloud mentality through using Teams? I think we need to not only use the tools that Microsoft's given us as far as reporting goes, but also dig a step deeper as to really see if whether or not there's true adoption. And that's something that will take a little bit of getting used to, but also the tools are there within a lot of the Teams reports.
Awesome, thank you. Well, thanks to our panelists. This is a lot of content that we went through, and a lot of questions really focus on where do I begin? And this is a question that's top of mind for a lot of folks. And one thing that we've seen a lot of success with as kind of a starting point is a 2-hour team strategy workshop. And to go over some of the details involving that, that's a working 2-hour session with our expert Microsoft Teams architects. Start with the current state, best practices we've talked about here, and other ones we weren't able to get to. And then we can recommend specific next steps for your organization. So if you're interested in that, you can email us at that email address. So we have had a lot of questions come in for today's panelists, and we won't be able to get to all of them, but we will go through as many as we can with the time that we have left here. And I would like to start with a question that we received. Is DLP governance option provided under the E3 or E5 license? That's
I'll take that.
Josh, what do you think?
Yeah, that's a super easy one. E5 and up, it is included.
All right, there you go. We've had a couple of questions around Zoom and security. Josh, are you able to talk through, or any of our panelists talk through some of the concerns with security in Zoom and how those integrations would work?
Yeah, I can't speak to the integration piece, but in terms of if you were using Microsoft as opposed to Zoom's, yeah, there's actually quite a bit in terms of security options for securing your meetings. There's the ability to lock down exactly who can get into it. You can lock down to the point where, the owner of the meeting has to accept people as they try and join the meeting, along with a couple of other kind of similar security pieces. But I would say that, Zoom has obviously done a lot to address their security issues that they've had, but Microsoft definitely was looking at those before Zoom did. And so right now I would say they're probably close to a parity at this point, but there are a ton of different options in how you allow somebody to take part in a meeting.
Thank you. We also had a question around Five9 and Twilio. Brian, can you talk through that?
Yeah, certainly. And I've actually spoken with Five9 about their Microsoft Teams integration. There's a couple of things they do. One, Five9 is built into their interface, so their agent interface, the ability to integrate with Teams to interact with experts. So if you have users within your organization who are not part of the contact center, but are often contacted by contact center agents, Five9's built-in interface has the ability for agents to interface to communicate with Microsoft Teams users directly from there and see their status and even bring them into the call. And so that goes to the second piece of integration that Five9 provides with Microsoft Teams, and that's a backend cloud-to-cloud integration that enables calling capability, right? So we're not because if you're on a Five9 contact center, you're leveraging Five9 for your PSTN connections most likely, and so you can avoid the need to do an external transfer through the use of this telephony connect feature. So that's what's there today, and there may be something more recently in terms of what we were discussing earlier that I'm not aware of, so I'll caveat there. I'm not as familiar with the Twilio piece, but I do know that Twilio has an SMS integration from their platform that allows Microsoft Teams users to SMS interface with customers or external parties directly from Teams. So that's something that's out there, but we'll have to get back to you on if there's any additional contact center functionality that Twilio interfaces with Teams.
Awesome. And another question that came in is, does Burwood offer training for Teams administrators? Andrew?
Yeah, great question. So we do offer training for Teams administrators. It's not necessarily the full 16-hour course that Microsoft's got baked out. Ours is more of a learning about the user requirements, as well as sort of keeping arm in arm with our engineers to learn more about building out and fleshing out your Teams environment.
Great. And our last question we'll be able to get to, sorry if we weren't able to get to your question, is any recommendation on how to prohibit duplicate teams being created without taking away the flexibility of allowing users to create their own ad hoc teams?
I can take that. So it's kind of twofold, and I'll make this pretty quick because I know we have other stuff to get through. But either one, what I see being the most successful is having just some type of team approval process. And you can actually now with Microsoft Approvals automate all of that piece so that it goes to your IT staff to make sure that it's not going to be something that's a duplicate. The other thing is there's a ton of great built-in reporting with Microsoft Teams, which because it's Microsoft, you also not only can get that through the online interface, you can also get it through PowerShell. A lot of times we just write automated reports that pull all of that data once a month and then reaches out to the team owners themselves to say, is this supposed to be a duplicate or is this, for some reason intentional? Those are the easiest ways that I've kind of seen that go through. But right now, those are really the only good solutions that they have.
Excellent. Thank you. And thank you to everybody who has submitted questions, and thank you to our panelists.